Well, we'll get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Charles Gauthier. I'm the President and CEO of the Downtown Vancouver Business Improvement Association. The background is my office. I've been back at work now for a little over 3 weeks after working from home for an extended period of time. Welcome to our weekly webinar series, DVVI Members Helping Members. We're so glad you could join us today. Before we jump into our content, I'll let you know that you can submit your questions in writing today via the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom window. Our presenters will be addressing your submitted questions after their presentation, but please feel free to submit your questions at any point throughout. And now let's get into today's programming. Today's topic is presented in partnership with Deloitte, and they will cover e-commerce and the digital enablement of your business. And I just want to do a big shout out to Deloitte for this. I believe this is potentially their 4th webinar they've done with us. And they were very willing when I approached them back in late March to do this, and much appreciated. Leading our programming and answering your most pressing questions will be Deloitte's Steve Penny and Zahir Jawani. Welcome, Steve and Zahir. A little bit about our presenters. Steve Penny is the Director of Consulting for Deloitte. He joined Deloitte's digital consulting practice in 2019. Prior to joining Deloitte, Steve led customer e-commerce, self-serve technology, and digital operations at TELUS Communications. Zahir Jawani is Deloitte's digital Senior Manager of Consulting and has been with Deloitte since 2018. He leads the Canadian Consumer Industry Group and advises nationally on customer strategy, marketing, digital, and loyalty. And now, without further delay, I'll hand it over to Zahir to get us started.
Thank you very much, Charles, and your leadership and the Downtown Vancouver Business Improvement Association's leadership in supporting members and supporting the community with regards to responding to COVID. I mean, you and your team have been doing a tremendous job, not just with this webinars, but all the advocacy that you've been doing. And we would like to really thank everyone who's attending this webinar. We really want to make this about meeting your needs. And so what we'll do is we'll go through a series of sort of some topics and some points of view, but really want to use it to really frame up a dialogue on this call or in this Zoom meeting around this topic. And at any point, if we're not able to cover a topic in this hour, Steve and I are happy to discuss it with you. And so we've covered introductions, and then what we're going to speak to first, and I'll take this as COVID, like what are the key impacts and implications, and really framed around what do they then mean for digital strategies. And my colleague Steve will then take a deeper dive into digital, looking at business to business opportunities as well as business to consumer, and some real practical things that you can do. And then we've got plenty of time for Q&A. So when we think about COVID, and COVID is a once in a lifetime, if not many lifetimes, challenge. At the same time as it's a challenge, both professionally, personally, through our society, we at Deloitte have taken this approach of how do we think about it from 3 dimensions. Respond, which is sort of arguably the phase that we've been in. How do we start to think about it in terms of recover, which is sort of where we're now going. And then how to look at it from a thrive point of view. And when we look at thrive, I want to be very clear, like COVID's impacts are wide-ranging. A number of them are going to be long-standing and very unfortunate. But when we think about thrive, it's like, how do you understand the situation? And as companies act in the best way that you can, to be sustainable as companies, be sustainable within the community, and sustainable for employees. And so when we look at COVID-19, COVID-19, we would say, has accelerated a number of key consumer trends and increased the pace at which consumer companies must mobilize and innovate. So what this means is there was a number of trends that we saw, especially with regards to digital. Online shopping is an example, some of the values that customers were looking for in terms of purpose from companies, and it's taken them and it's accelerated them. And then what's really material is also like the need for companies to move, not necessarily in months and years, but in days and weeks, to be able to not just respond, but be able to adapt. And so there's been about 6 things that we've seen that consumers are looking for companies with purpose. And this is really important. And so, and this comes from work that we're doing in Canada as well as across the world with our global consumer tracker survey. It's publicly available, on the internet. If you can Google it, or we can send it out. So number one is purpose-driven brands. Like, consumers are really looking and saying, who's been there for them as consumers, who's been them as a company in the community, who's been treating their employees fairly, who's supporting local communities. And that's been really showing up in where consumers, while their discretionary and total income is lower, they're shifting more income to being, buying from brands that are purpose-driven. Number two, and not surprisingly, is omni-channel. And so convenience as well as safety are becoming more important to consumers. And so how are those companies delivering seamless omni-channel experiences? Those experiences might be to shop, but as we've seen more and more, those experiences are ways to interact with a brand. If it's a B2B company, it's about doing inspections virtually. If it's a public institution like the Art Gallery, which is a member of the association, and they've been doing great things. I'm a member as an example of how do they kind of keep engaged with the membership and the general public through virtual types of sessions, which have been excellent. Another trend that's been important in terms of consumer expectations is unique assortment. I mean, people's money has to stretch further. And so people are really looking for, being more discerning about the products that they're going to buy, wanting to buy it at a fair price, wanting to ensure it has value. And, is there a really clear value proposition that I'm going to buy from you, right? Is it that it's local, it's price competitive, it can get to me quickly? And, Charles and myself and Steve, we were talking before this about some challenges in delivery. So, you have to look at the overall value proposition. Fourth is a focus on health and safety, really not surprisingly. I mean, this has become a huge driver of choice for consumers, and this is both business to business and business to consumers. So how are businesses responding to ensure health and safety of their employees, health and safety of customers, both on premises and off? How are they ensuring that they're tracking it? We're seeing more and more companies actually look to implement tracking solutions to track if employees are okay, if they're not okay, making sure that they've done the quarantines and doing more of that in an automatic way. And customers are looking for that surety. In terms of the competitive landscape, this is not surprising. So digital is enabling the emergence of new business models. So like endless aisle. So what endless aisle means is you could either walk into a store or you're ordering online and you've got access to what assortment the company carries, but also maybe they've got a marketplace. So a good example of this is at a larger scale is Best Buy Canada, where they've got what they sell, but they've also got an example of a marketplace. And you're starting to see this now move to smaller companies where they might be banding together with, in terms of groups to sell their wares. And the other thing is investments in customer experience. Like, this is a trend that was taking place before COVID, but is fundamentally escalated, not escalated, but has moved faster. So if a company can't meet the needs of consumers, someone else will. And so this has been really critical. So when we're looking at like the state of where the consumers are at, and this comes from our global tracking survey. And what's important here is we're doing a comparison, not just of Canada, but 16 countries in the world. And what we're highlighting here is China and South Korea as well, because it's it gives you kind of a gradient of where they're going to go. So like China and South Korea are about arguably maybe 3 months ahead of Canada in terms of sort of COVID. And you can definitely see like some trends. So in terms of concern about physical well-being, like this is very high in Canada. So 56% of Canadians are concerned about this. And people are actually even more concerned, not surprisingly, about the health of their families. So this is a basic need, but also a value that's going to be important in terms of how they're going to do business. Financial security, is material. I mean, we're facing the highest unemployment, Canada's ever faced since the Great Depression. But what's an interesting compare and contrast is people are more concerned about their health at materially higher than they are about their ability to spend. And what we can see here is that, this may stay for a long time. So if you look at China, upcoming payments, and Korea, like that's still persisted over the last couple months in those countries as they've recovered. Delaying purchases as well. I mean, some of this depends on the country culture, but has been also present. In terms of where we're seeing changes in spending, so we're seeing, and this is intent to spend over the next 4 weeks. So this is forward looking. So we're going to start to see more of a plateauing of the increase in alcohol spend that we've seen over the last several months. We're going to continue to see, unfortunately, more of a continued decline with an intent to purchase apparel. Now, again, these are blanket categories. This doesn't necessarily cascade itself to individual retailers. Sorry, my mouse slipped. Books, electronics, any of these that are discretionary categories will continue to see downward shifts in spending. Electronics was high before as people adapted to work from home, but it's starting to trend down. And what we're seeing really in terms of intent to spend, and we're seeing this through other ways as well, is that there'll be a continued focus on purchasing of everyday household goods, groceries, and medicines. Some level of downshift in terms of restaurants, when really with income tighter, people continuing not to necessarily see themselves go out of the home, that they're going to really hunker down and spend in core categories. If we look at where we're seeing a shift, you are seeing in these numbers a continued shift to online. So for example, alcohol, 13% online. That would have been very low single digits pre-COVID. If you look at apparel pre-COVID, it was in the range of 20 to 30%, and it's up to 45. Electronics similarly was more in the 25 to 30, is up to 43. If you look at groceries was in the range of 3 to 5%, and it's up to 13. So you're definitely seeing a shift to e-commerce and digital. And what you're likely going to see is what we've in other jurisdictions is this is continued. This may drop down a little bit, but our new normals will fundamentally reset at a 2 to 3 times higher rate of penetration for online and digital. So what's the impact? And so what are some questions like for you that can shape some of your thinking? Really look at the key trends, right? So the way we live and work, like this is really fundamental. Like a lot of where the opportunity to innovate and drive business or drive traction with customers is to understand how people are going to live. How are they interacting with their friends and family? What's going to happen with their flexible arrangements? Are they going to stay, as we're starting to see in the US? How are their appreciations going to change? Are people going to become more homebound, as we've seen, more focused on the outdoors? And you want to think about how your products, categories, services can fit into that. What is the way that Canadians are going to shop? So we've talked about digital, but also when customers are going into stores or galleries or businesses, what's going to be their demand for touchless on-demand products? People are not going to necessarily want to dwell in a store. So you want to think through all of those implications. And how do you make it easy? It can be simple things like store layout, for example, that makes it easier, wider lanes, easier ways for people to purchase. Maybe you want to move more frequently, moving inventory to the front of the store. What we deem as convenience is also going to change. So there's going to be an increased focus on, convenience at the site. Do I have to wait in line somewhere? Can I get in easily? Can I pay quickly? Do I have to actually go into a fitting room? I think things like that are going to be really important. And those are examples, but that would be similar if someone's going to be also dealing with a business-to-business situation as well. I've talked about this a lot, and we're actually starting to engage with a number of clients with mandates in this area, is the values we have. Values are fundamentally shifting. There's some work that we've actually just published today from out of the US that showed the desire for control as well as comfort are materially changing. The two values that are becoming more and more important, and they're almost now 50% of sort of what's important in our value index. And lastly, regulations and restrictions. I mean, I'm kind of stating the obvious here, but they'll continue to be important. And it's not just about how you follow them to the law, the letter, but also how proactive you are, and how do you see those as opportunities? How do you think about how you need to demonstrate to your customers how you're not just following the spirit, but you're also following you're being proactive about these. And so to that point, you know, as you kind of seen based on the consumer behavior, the categories they're going to purchase on, how their values are going to change, like all of these have high intersection to digital. And that's what my colleague Steve's going to talk about in terms of like how businesses, whether business to business or business to consumer, can respond.
Hey, thanks, Zahir, and thanks, Charles, for the introduction and the invitation to speak here today. So, yeah, I will talk in a little bit more detail on the points that Zahir just covered in the introduction. I'll speak around some tactics we're seeing in the B2C, and B2B space, and then reference a few case studies where Deloitte has worked with clients across Canada in the in the past few weeks and months to help rapidly digitize their business, and we'll get into some Q&A following that. So I'll start in the B2C space. A lot of the same themes are applicable across direct-to-consumer and B2B businesses, but I think there are some subtle differences, and I'm just going to highlight those. So those are really across these 5 boxes on the screen. Is the one the furthest to the left is really around, you can imagine this, I need to sell my product or service online, or I used to sell my product or service online and it's no longer fit for purpose. So my background is, you heard in the intro, I've spent my career trying to help businesses increase the share of their digital sales and service. So that means, how do you move from 5% of your sales through the website up to 10 or 10 to 20 or 20 to 30? And, as Zahir covered, a lot of businesses across Canada, it varies on sector, but a lot of businesses across Canada are seeing, 10, 20% of their sales coming through digital. Well, you can imagine if the retail channel or your storefront was no longer able to generate that 90% of your sales or service, then you really need to find a much more efficient e-commerce capability. So I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into our case studies as well, but there are a number of ways companies have been doing this, and it really depends on the size and scale, right? Like there are suites of tools that a large enterprise can go and acquire, and also, I could probably build myself an e-commerce site while we were on this this call if I had a widget that I wanted to sell. It's become that accessible through digital marketing. So that's really been around how do we promote or create custom messaging to our customer base. So examples of how we've seen this is what hours are we open, and what social distance measures have we taken? I know a lot of companies have shied away from our hard selling message, but there's been industries certainly where we've needed to communicate with the customer base, and the types of tools and tactics I'm talking about here are really like, an email, a lead nurturing system, a marketing automation system are examples of how we could accomplish this. I think we just lost our slide, but we can keep going. Then we talk around fulfillment. So that's been a real challenge. We actually had a little discussion prior to this call around some of the challenges we've seen in fulfillment. More people are ordering online. At the same time, the distribution channel has been challenged and strained, right? If you've ordered anything online in the past couple of months, you might have experienced delays or a message saying we've prioritized essential goods only, or relying on the regular channels like Canada Post has been, there's been service delays there. So we've been looking at how do we help unlock other distribution. You've seen companies like the food delivery guys in Vancouver certainly offering more, and as well as the restaurants offering more capabilities in this space, as well as trying a connection between the website and your storefront, whatever it may be. So if you're selling a physical good, then buy online, pick up in store, or pick up on curbside has certainly been, it used to be like almost like the holy grail of e-commerce, and now it's a table stake capability. Certainly that may be a comment more geared to a medium-sized or larger business. And then around merchandising. So this is how do you describe or place your product for distribution online, or service for distribution online, and really trying to link it with all the rest of the other tactics we listed there. So in some cases, you actually need to redesign your product or your service, or your it gets in our pricing is our next piece, but or discern your pricing and bundling strategy to make it easier to consume for an online customer. So things that were maybe worked on a shelf perhaps don't make as much sense when they're described through web, and really making, optimizing your product merchandising has been an area we've seen a lot of focus. So that's really like, think about reviews, 360 feedback, like all these ideas of how do you merchandise your product. And then I think another important area, actually maybe we just go ahead to the B2B, because this the other one I want to talk about is applicable in the B2B space too. So I would say the trend of the subtle difference between the B2C, or the direct to customer, and the B2B business is that, often there is less direct fulfillment online. So more energy is spent on marketing, lead generation type activities than we've seen in the retail. So we would see a lower penetration of full e-commerce in a B2B space than we will see in B2C. But we've seen, your traditional activities, be it, I don't want to generalize, but, conferencing, networking events, you've seen they've obviously taken a big hit, and companies have shifted to digital marketing. You've seen more activity in LinkedIn, in social channels around how we can, promote business and communicate with customers. And then I will talk on the last one, which I think we might be covering up with our Zoom here, is around customer service, right? It's been a major opportunity, is how do you enable things like FAQ, web chat, communication, like account management type activities that, maybe hadn't been stood up before, but now are overrunning, the business in terms of inbound calls, or, depending on the size and scale of the company, it could be a small shop, you're getting a lot of calls, but a big business that may be tens or tens of thousands of additional calls. And then how do you use your website and digital properties to help perhaps answer what I would generally call high volume, low value calls. So that would be like, are you open? How do I find you? How do I, what social distancing or safe shopping measures do you have? Right down to, I have questions around my product or service. These are the types of things that, the website can certainly be geared to help take that cost and pressure from the business to allow it to focus on, those tactics that would be called more value generating, I guess I would say. So I think that those cover like the major themes, like how do I sell, how do I transact, how do I build a digital marketing or e-marketing or social media capability, how do I actually fulfill and deliver goods, to connecting the website with what's actually in physical inventory, through to distribution, and then certainly on the existing customer base, how do you service your existing customers? So those are pretty much the main themes across B2B and B2C. I'm going to jump into a couple of case studies now, but maybe while I just talked about those trends, if those jog any questions, we're going to go into questions right after this. So I think you can pump them into the Q&A. So these trends are just, these are some examples. I'm like trying to help make what I just spoke about a little bit more real. So the first one we'll talk about is launching e-commerce quickly. So I mentioned, I was only kind of half joking that I probably could have launched a e-commerce site if I had something to sell while we were on this call. If you look at the suite of products and services out there, like Shopify, for example, just one, there are a number of other equally good or better types of platforms that could be used. But, you know, we've helped business, like a national Canadian business, launch an online capability, and like it was literally 2 weeks to build the capability. Realistically, it's a 6+ week initiative, but it's really just standing up an e-commerce site. And that means like the site is one thing, but it's really to get your business operating. Building a muscle around, I've submitted an online order. It actually has to be, perhaps it needs to be manually fulfilled, and that's not something that we're used to doing, and certainly not at scale. So those are some of the growing pains and transformation type initiatives that we've been able to help some Canadian businesses with throughout this period. Again, on the optimizing it, I think like I spoke to this in my my intro, but like as we become more reliant on your online experience and your checkout process and your online merchandising, it becomes like if you're getting, let's say you're getting like 60+% of your business through your website, all of a sudden that funnel or that end-to-end experience becomes critical, right? Somebody, like pretend you have a paid ad, or maybe you don't, someone searches for your service or product online, the path that they take from displaying that intent or desire to purchase or engage with your business right through fulfillment. I guess speaking as somebody who spent their career building and delivering web properties, you would be amazed at what barriers we present to our customers and their partners to be able to actually do business with us, right? So you just think about like what is the core, what's the core business that you're in? If it's like, selling flowers, then how hard would it be for a customer to order, the most popular arrangement on your website, and then actually optimizing that experience to remove as much friction as you can from it. It's amazing what kind of a benefit that can actually deliver. And refining the digital marketing is really about how do you optimize that from end to end. So, making sure that if you're buying paid media, that the media is driving the best value through that marketing funnel online. That's probably one that there's a whole industry built up around, but we've certainly been able to help. I guess Canadian alcohol holding companies are you can probably narrow it down to a couple of provinces of what those might have been, but and certainly help them to be able to drive that their efficiency in that channel. So I think those ones are probably the ones I'll just touch on. Really, we have another example. It's sort of on the same theme. Is like, I had no e-commerce capability, or I had some e-commerce capability, it wasn't fit for purpose, and we've helped a huge number of businesses in along that path. And that's kind of not my point in speaking about it to say that we're looking to help you per se, but I think it's how do we generate some good conversation and discussion around it. And I think like my other message is there are a lot of tools out there, and a lot of them are very accessible and depending on the size and scale of of what you're trying to do, we may be able to do something quick. And that's certainly been the theme of what we've been doing in the post-COVID, when there used to be a lot of concerns around how do we can't do X, Y, or Z online because we've never done that, and obviously that's really challenged a lot of the paradigms that a lot of our businesses have been operating in. So I feel like I just spoke a lot. it's obviously a topic that I'm pretty passionate about. I'll maybe take a breather and we'll hand it back to Charles, who's going to take the questions. So thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Zahir and Stephen. Zahir, thanks for the kudos that you gave to the organization at the beginning of your presentation. Certainly appreciate that. I know my team and I have enjoyed putting these webinars together and bringing our members together virtually during these challenging times. And so we are getting a lot of questions, so I won't continue on here. Why don't I start with the first one in the list. In terms of the respond, recovery, thrive cycles here that you showed at the beginning of your presentation, what digital methods will be good for responding?
Steve, do you want to take that or do you want me to respond to that?
I think you go ahead.
Okay, so I think that the core of it, like I would just kind of piece this into two sections, right? There's a what and a how. And so what's actually quite important to be successful with digital is to understand the human experience. So what does that mean, right? So, and you don't necessarily have to do this in a way that's overly scientific, right? But like, how are values changing? So some of what we presented kind of gives examples of that. You want to understand with your customers, understand how their values are changing. Then what you want to understand is, well, how does that then impact the customer journey and the moments that matter? So, you know, as I was referencing, is it about how they enter and kind of flow through a store? Is it about how they, you know, is there safety and security as things get picked up? So what are the moments that are going to really matter? Because that's going to impact like your value proposition. And then based on that, you're going to design your experiences, which then becomes the how of the digital, right? So then you want to really kind of quickly translate those like journey maps and moment maps and your proposition to like what kind of experiences follow those, right? So is it well designed? Is it fast? Is it easy? Against those kind of pain points where customers may want touchless or not to go into a physical location, can they do it digitally? So that's how you have to connect it. And then as you build those, again, can you look at like quick and easy platforms, Shopify, Magento for e-commerce? You can stand up websites generally really quickly. You can build databases using cloud platforms like AWS or Google or Azure. You can kind of stand your digital platforms up then relatively quickly. And then lastly, what you want to make sure you do though is two things. One, you want to test that with users. So like get things prototyped. They don't have to be perfect. Make sure they're kind of, you know, going to work with your users and they meet their needs. But second is you're going to keep iterating. Like literally it might've been before you release something and you go into these agile sprints, but those are going to be really quick and things might have to change in kind of like every couple days or every week or so. And so you have to really be your ears and your feedback has to be with your customers. Steve, would you like to build on that? Oh, sorry, after you, Charles.
No, I think that captures it, so you're good.
The next question we have is, what if an operation has limited funds to move towards digital? Are there any resources available?
Yeah, I will. I'll start there. So there are some resources. We're actually working with with some governments and municipalities around how we can help, you know, consolidate that for BC businesses. But really, there are a couple examples of tools like, you know, there are tools like Shopify, which we mentioned for e-commerce. There are free resources like tools like MailChimp and others on the digital, on the communication side. I actually know of some examples like Canada Post has pulled together as well. So I don't know if I can try to get back to you with a link that would house some of these versus me try to name them off. But I think like that that question, Stella, is a good one because it I think we sort of have a duty to compile these, right? Like a lot of people are asking the same thing. Some people have, so I'll see if I can find a concise listing of it.
Yeah, if you could source that and then send it to Nicola on my team, and what we could do is we could send it to the participants after the event. The next question I have, are there any examples that you cited driven by COVID per se? Like,
Yeah, so maybe I'll start that one because I can actually think of a good example, and then I'll see if Zahir's got any as well. But so one of them was a chocolatier, a chocolate business that did no business online, and it only a pretty big, I guess, medium-sized business that um, had no online distribution capability and a huge amount of inventory. So and that continued to accumulate as the retail stores were closed due to COVID, and it represented a big challenge. So we helped stand up a very quick e-commerce capability for them in order for them to sustain operations, but really to help move through what was becoming an inventory challenge. So that's probably the one that really stands out to me. I don't know, Zahir, if you've got anything to add.
I mean, the other ones that are interesting is a number of the restaurants like Earl's Group, for example, that have shifted to selling groceries. And I think that's a good example of two things. Like one, you go like Earl's selling groceries, or, and a couple of things. Like they already had the ability to take orders online. They have delivery capacity, and they have the ability for customers to pick up, right? So they leveraged an existing capability and changed the product. And then the question is, well, why would customers shop there? Well, a couple of things. I mean, these types of, a number of these restaurants are known for good quality food, right? So people trust that what, the other products they're going to offer are going to be, high quality and going to be on brand. And there's going to be some level, and they did a good job of linking it to their brands, right? So they curated meal kits and other things, right? So you always want to think about what's the business you're in and what are the strengths? Like, what are the strengths in terms of like your company capabilities? What kind of products do you offer, right? And can you kind of extend those to different offerings? And then who are your customers, and do you have brand affinity with them so that, maybe you can change your offering? And I think you'll see more and more of this, especially as more products go virtual.
Yeah, that was, oh, sorry, no, I was just gonna say that's a great example. I wish I thought of that one. That was the one, so many people I hear actually went to Earl's for groceries, which, I mean, I know they wouldn't be considered in small business, but it's a good example of people changing the dynamic and business model through this time.
I guess another advantage of the Earl example you gave is as a consumer, you don't need to wait at a grocery store lineup like Safeway to get in. So convenience.
Yes, exactly.
Time is money. Next question is, what would you recommend a travel insurance to do, given that transport industry is being the hardest hit?
I do. I have clients that are in the travel and hospitality industry. I mean, I think we don't have a crystal ball, and I don't think anyone does. And I do feel a lot of heavy hearts of what's happening in the travel industry, especially with not just clients, but just people I know. I mean, I think where you'll probably see a shift in it, and it's actually our consumer survey. If you Google like Deloitte consumer survey, or we can send out the link, has got this chart of intent to travel. But what it shows is like, what's the intent to book in a hotel versus take a flight? And booking a hotel is higher than taking a flight. And so you may want to look at like, where could I be like allowing customers to book local packages? Maybe it's shorter duration flights, maybe it's staycations, maybe it's places people can drive to. So have a think about that, because that seems to be going to come back faster than long haul travel. Like, it's less likely people from Vancouver are going to then fly via one of the connecting countries in the world to go somewhere on a 14-hour flight, right? They're going to probably stay close to home. So those are the things to look at.
Okay, we have a few more questions here. What are the top changes you've witnessed in how companies are doing business online as a result of COVID-19? You mentioned Earl's as one of them.
Steve, do you want to?
Yeah, I think it's, I might have touched on it really. It was really that, the change, the trend was, let's say it was 10 to 20% of all business online. That could become 40 or 60%. So that has created a bit of a burning platform for businesses to change how they were operating, and probably it meant new capabilities and ways of working were required. So I don't know.
The next question we have is, how are companies trying to take advantage of this change in the market? I think that relates to COVID-19.
Yeah, I think that those it's similar to our Earl's example. I think that we've also seen a number of local restaurants. Like I certainly have as a user, you know, I've been ordering more food for delivery. So I've seen more of the restaurants that I would have gone to either offer their own delivery on their website. They've offered a curbside pickup, or they've plugged into an you know, an aggregator. Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes, DoorDash have become much more prevalent. And then, you know, I think that we're all aware of, you know, some of the knock-on effects that those distribution technologies have had on margins. So we've also seen some of those offer, you know, free order placement if you pick up and those types of things. So I think a lot of it is around adopting the business model to meet these types of changes.
And I'd build on that. So if we think about services businesses, which are really a big part of the economy, like how can you move them to virtual, right? Like we've seen with Steve and I were presenting with a restoration company last week in a Deloitte forum, and they've moved most of their business to be, most of their inspections to be online, and they're actually able to do more inspections now because they don't have the time of transportation. And so they've moved that way. Or similarly, you've seen with you know, mental health professionals or even personal trainers moving their business to be online, reducing travel time, and things like that, basically using virtual technology as a way that you can innovate, right? How, you know, if you're, you know, in a business where, you know, maybe you do the pre-consultation via video that encourages people to sort of pre-review them if it's a jewelry product or anything that's sort of high consideration, so that, and then when you actually have to make the transaction, if someone has to come in store, then it's quicker, or it's something that people could ship, right? So think about like offering services virtually and taking advantage of the technology.
It's kind of a related question. Do you think more and more street level businesses, retailers are going to adopt a by appointment strategy? It's kind of not exactly related to what your expertise is based on, but do you think you'll see retailers move to that model where you have to book an appointment to be able to go and buy?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think ultimately two things, like a lot of retail categories have some level of impulse, right? You're walking, you see something catches your eye, right? And so if you move to by appointment, it kind of can impact that, right? But at the same time, I think customers, it's a great point, Charles, because customers are going to be motivated by choice. Maybe you're going to have a certain number of hours in a day that are by appointment, right? Before or after. So we've seen that for first responders and seniors, but maybe there's other types of, you know, for most loyal customers, do you have special appointments that allow them to have less traffic in the store, get in and out? You know, that's certainly plausible.
Again, we still have a few more minutes for questions. If you do have a question, just post it in the Q&A box. I have one other one here that's standing in the queue, and it might be related. You might have answered this in part, but what do you see as the future of digital adoption and key trends for BC businesses post-COVID-19?
Yeah, I think we will see. I guess we don't actually know how long all of this stuff will last, but I think a lot of the behaviors will probably last longer than the actual, you know, the challenges from COVID itself, right? Like most of us will go to the office less. Most of us will shop online more and have an expectation of the companies that we deal with, if they're product or service providers, to be able to have full capabilities in this space, right? Like before, you may have been you may have had less expectations of like a small business to have online capability, and now you would probably expect everybody can service your request online in some form, and I think that's going to have a lasting impact beyond just the COVID-19 era.
Is that here?
I tend to concur with Steve. I think you're going to ultimately just see a series of permanent shifts, and I think the big takeaway will be that, like, as values shift and some of the constraints around spending, it's just going to be this rapid ability to like understand customers that doesn't always have to be structured and big engagements, right? But really staying close to your customers and adapting and doing so really quickly, I think is going to be the big shift.
Well, I don't see any other questions, and I'm just going to be cognizant of everyone's time. So I'll just wrap it up. Thanks again to Zahir and Steve for all of your great content today and for fielding questions from our membership. Participants will make sure that you have access to the recording as well as to the slide deck. And to the participants, you'll be receiving a follow-up survey via email this afternoon. We appreciate hearing from you and hope that you'll find a few moments to fill out the survey and let us know how we did today. We'd also like to hear any suggestions for future webinar topics. I already had one suggestion provided to us, so thank you very much for doing that. And we'll be hosting these weekly webinars on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock for the foreseeable future. We might slow the schedule down during the summer months, but our intent is to try to do this on a weekly basis. Next week's topic will be presented by Danya Vahidi from Bowden Law. And the topic will be legal considerations of operating your business online. Sounds like a nice little fit here. Follow up to what you just did.
Excellent.
So that's it for today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. And again, thanks to Zahir and Steve and Deloitte for your presentation and your time today. So thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.